and welcome to my first costume breakdown. I figured that I would go ahead and run through some of my favorite costumes that I have made and explain what materials I used, how I made them. So let's get started, shall we? I have displayed on my bed right now my Cardcaptor Sakura costume. This one is her red cape, and this is the first costume she actually wears as a card captor. The first one that Tomoyo has made for her. As a kid, I always really loved this costume. So when I started cosplaying, I knew I had to do this one at some point, and this was the first Cardcaptor Sakura cosplay I decided to do. This costume consists of a whole bunch of different parts. I broke it down into a basic leotard, the waistcoat, the cape, there's also the socks, the gloves, the wig of course, the shoes, the hat, and of course her claw staff. All of the blue material here that you see, like for instance on the tails of the hat, on the leotard, and on the socks, it's all lycra. The leotard is a pretty simple one. It has elastic in the leg, it has long sleeves, and it has a high collar. Now because I wasn't sure how this high collar would fit over my head, I decided to put a zipper in this, which proved to be quite difficult, especially since I considered putting an invisible zipper in it. So there's my zipper. You can check out my tutorial on how to insert an invisible zipper without an invisible zipper foot. I'll link that in the description box below. I put Velcro pieces on the collar so that it would close up right after the zipper. Next I have my waistcoat. I took a dress pattern that had princess seams in it, and I modified it to have the tails on the back and then kind of curve in front so that it would stand at my hip level. It opens up in the front with Velcro, and all of this gold trim is just gold bias tape that I sewed on. The piping is also, it's a cord that's been wrapped in the same bias tape and then just sewn into the actual seam itself, the princess seam. The vest itself is completely lined because I don't like having to deal with fraying edges, especially when I have something exposed, like the tails. This white fabric that I use is a white poly cotton fabric, and you can buy that pretty much anywhere. It's super cheap. Another reason why I lined it is because this fabric is also pretty thin, and I wanted to give it some durability. So keep that in mind when you're going for poly cottons. So the next thing that I made was the cape itself. So the cape has a very interesting shape to it. I decided to go with a half circle cape. And then it has the ragged edge, so I basically cut triangular pieces along the hem and then just kind of rolled it over and zigzagged the edges so that it wouldn't fray so much. This red fabric is a polyester, and it has a really interesting, I don't know if you can see the texture here, I'll bring it close. I don't know if you can see the texture, but it's got this really nice ribbed feeling to it. It also has a really nice drape. I really like the drape to it. That's why I chose it. Her cape was very interesting to make because of the collar. There's a double mandarin collar in this cape. So I figured out how to do that by creating a wider opening for the cape than I would have. Sewed my first mandarin collar into that one. Added an insert piece of fabric that was the same shape as the first curve, and then it had a smaller opening, and then I sewed the second mandarin collar into that opening. So that's how I got around it. The cape closes with some Velcro. To hold it in place, I just safety pin it on my shoulders of the leotard. And I also have this bow, which is kind of just sits there off of the strap that goes across. And I also have this to pin it in place so that it doesn't move around so much. Next up, I'll talk about the socks. So these socks are very, very simple to make. I didn't use any pattern. It's just a simple seam that starts from the pinky toe, goes around the tip of the big toe, and then just straight down all the way to the top of the sock. Basically what I did was I took a rectangular piece of this fabric. Well, I sewed it first along the top, and then I pinned it so that I could put it on and check the tightness. And I would adjust the tightness by pinning it even more. And I would make sure that the pins were they made the line so that I could mark it out and then sew it later. Her gloves, like every other gloves that I have made, they've all been hand sewn by me. I draft my own pattern for the gloves. I don't have a tutorial for that specifically because for me it takes a lot of trial and error. Basically what I do is I put my hand in a latex glove and then I tape it, and then I take a permanent marker and then I mark off where the seam lines are going to go. So for instance, there's a thumb that is separate, and then so I mark around the thumb with my pen. And I also have these little inserts here, which are called fourchettes. This is to help keep the fingers flexible, because if you just kind of sew all along the fingers, you're not going to have very much flexibility and it's going to kind of bulge in weird places. So what you would do is you would take your pen and you'd go along the inside of your fingers, and then you'd go along the outside of your fingers and kind of create like this little inset thing. Now because this had a specific cuff to it, I added the cuff later, and it's stuffed with some scrap Ponte du Roma fabric that I had lying around. So next we'll talk about the shoes. I went ahead and just bought a pair of regular white shoes. I made sure that they were completely white because I knew I was going to paint them. So I first took my design and I drew the lines. In this case, I didn't really need to draw too many lines. I just needed to draw lines around here, around the shoelace, and around the back here. Then I took my red acrylic paint and I painted it all. And as you can see, off of the rubber, it's actually coming off. This has happened because of friction from walking and just general wear and tear. So keep that in mind. If you want to wear this often, make sure you get a lot of the same red paint that you have, just so you can do touch-ups. I haven't worn this in a while, so I haven't touched it up recently. Let's talk about the hat now. So this hat is a basic beret type hat. I kind of made this hat a little too small, so I actually have to take these barrettes here and pin it onto my wig like that. The tails have these little pieces on the end. These are made out of craft foam, painted in gold and black and white acrylics. And the little dots here, the little beads, are just embroidery thread that it just kind of made into little dots. So this was a wig that I purchased from Cosplay.com a while ago. This is a couple years ago that I bought this wig. And it was originally, here, let me see if I can find any wefts that, I don't know if you can tell, but it was originally like a lighter blonde like here. And then I took some Sharpie markers, diluted them in a alcohol solvent, mixed it all up, and sprayed the dye on. I did it a couple times because it took a while for the dye to sink in. I actually needed to use 4 brown Sharpie markers to get it from that light blonde color to this kind of darker blonde color. So keep that in mind when you're dyeing a wig. The bangs were cut. Over time they deflate. Every now and then I had to go in and tease the bottom and then flip it up. The actual wig was cut too so that I could have the little long pieces and then the short back as well. The antennas were made by having just a clear elastic holding them up with a lot of hairspray and a lot of fabric glue kind of holding it up. These big poofy things, these are just made using the same technique that I use for the bangs, where I go under, I tease it, and then comb it over with a lot of hairspray and stuff. Last but not least is my clow staff. I actually have a tutorial on how I made this, and I will link that also in the description box below. It started off with a wooden dowel. The head was made using a combination of multiple styrofoam pieces. The main piece is a large styrofoam sphere. This beak was originally a styrofoam cone that kind of came out this way. And then these two pieces are small, like a small styrofoam sphere. So basically what I did was I took my large styrofoam sphere, I marked off the places where I wanted the beak and the eyes to go, as well as where the dowel was going to be inserted. I took a carving knife, like a box cutter knife, and I gently carved out a little place for the dowel. I carved out a little indent for the cone, as well as the half spheres. So these were cut in half, the sphere was cut in half. Once everything was glued in place, I used white glue to kind of set it in. I carved down the cone until I got like a nice beak-like shape. It's really just, you have to do it by eye. I can't really tell you how to do it. Next, I covered everything with a layer of Warbler. I added some thicker layers around the edges of certain things to make it more 3D. Then I primed everything with some layers of white glue. I attempted sanding it down, but didn't really do much. Then I painted it and added the craft foam wings. This end is completely sculpted using Warbler. I just kind of improvised it. This is not very accurate, but I just improvised it and then did the same thing, primed it, painted it, and then sealed this entire thing with Mod Podge spray. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that it was informative and that it inspires you to make your Cardcaptor Sakura cosplay. If you really like this kind of costume breakdown thing, please comment below and let me know how I did. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.